Hello, Code for America. I am Molly, and I am a designer.
And I'm Ryan, and I'm a policy wonk.
And we're going to tell you a little story about what happens when a policy wonk and a designer walk into a bar to fix America's social safety net.
Begin scene. Hey, I'm Ryan. You look nice. What's your name?
Hi, Ryan. I'm Molly.
Oh, you're probably wondering about my badge here. It means that I work at the White House, you know, with the president.
Oh, nice to meet you, Ryan. Okay, so White House Ryan, why do you look simultaneously excited and overwhelmed all at the same time?
Well, one of the things I've really been thinking about lately is this crazy statistic that people who are born into the top 20% of the income distribution, they have a 2/3 chance of staying there. But people born in the bottom half, they only have a 1 in 20 chance of making it out. And so we've been thinking a lot about what can we do to make traction on that problem without congressional action.
Well, when I think of policy and making change, I think we pretty much have to do everything through Congress, right?
We can actually do a lot. A term of art that we've coined is called pen and phone. Basically, that means the president can use his pen to write executive actions without Congress, and he can pick up his phone to call literally anyone in the world to help us make traction on problems.
Is this what people usually talk about in bars in DC?
I think it's part DC, it's part me, but since you seem so interested, let me tell you more. So here's the interesting thing on the income inequality side. We already have dozens, hundreds of federal programs that are designed to help lift people out of poverty and provide them with a safety net when they fall down. We have food stamps, temporary assistance for needy families, you probably know as welfare, housing assistance, childcare, healthcare, the list goes on. We spend about $700 billion a year on those programs, but the thing is, 15 to 40% of people who qualify for those sorts of benefits to help them and their families aren't taking advantage of them. Isn't that crazy?
That is really crazy. It sounds hugely important, but it's really cool that you get to do this work for your job.
I know, my job is so cool. It's so good it doesn't have to end soon or anything like that.
Oh yeah, cool. So what's the big idea to get people better access to their benefits, White House Ryan?
So here are some things that we know about the problem in the solution space. First, a bunch of these people qualify for multiple programs. If you're qualified for Medicaid, you are 96% likely to also qualify for food stamps and other programs. Second, the people who aren't enrolled tell us that part of the big problem is the application process is too hard and burdensome, so they drop out. And lastly, making the process more streamlined and efficient, like I was saying earlier, it doesn't require congressional action. It doesn't require changes to federal rules and restrictions. States can start making progress right now. That's a huge deal in government.
So what are some of the things that states could be doing?
Well, they could do a lot of things, but to name three, first, they could create a single application for people to apply for multiple benefits. They could reconcile the different requirements that people have to face when they're enrolling for different programs. And lastly, they could put in place back-end services so that when people enroll, for example, in SNAP, they can automatically get enrolled in Medicaid based on that data. One good example is in Idaho. A few years ago, almost 10% of people who had access to healthcare were temporarily losing that access every year. Now, they've got that down to less than 1%. They've been able to do that by using SNAP, food stamp enrollment data, to renew people for healthcare.
Well, so if places are already doing this, why isn't this problem fixed?
Well, as is often the case in government, while this stuff is technically allowed, it's still really hard. If states want to do this, they still have to navigate thousands of pages of federal rules and regulations. Moreover, they have limited budgets, changing political atmospheres. Being creative and coming up with innovative solutions is really hard. You know, what they really need is like a better framework to prioritize the changes that are needed based on what would make the most impact. There are so many options, so any of them is going to be an uphill battle. They have to figure out which ones to do. You know, one of the main things I love about my job is when I face stuff like this, I go and find smart people who can look at the problem in a new way, but if only there was someone who could help me think through this. Anyways, enough about me. What is it that you do?
Oh, well, I'm a designer.
Oh, how am I looking?
I'm not like a fashion designer, I'm a civic designer. So I try to understand the problems that people are having with government programs and services and design them to sort of meet their needs a little bit better.
Oh, wow. So kind of just like what I was describing I need. What would you do about this issue?
Well, hypothetically, if I were working on this problem, I would want to start with users. I would want to understand what people are going through who've been in contact with these programs. I want to know what it feels like to have heartache and hope and be left in the lurch because of policy decisions that folks like you might be making. But also because there's all those constraints you were talking about, I want to know what it's like on the front lines, behind the scenes, how these enrollment operations work.
Okay, Molly, fancy civic designer. How would you do that?
Well, hypothetically, if I were going to work on something like this, I would want to really understand the complexity of the issues. There's so much going on here that every single decision that we make that we show a user affects their likeliness to move forward. So whether they can understand how a question is framed, whether they can read something on their phone, that's the difference between them being connected to a service or not. We'd want to design and test with real people. And hypothetically, we'd maybe want to do some user research up front to sort of understand the whole experience from their perspective.
User research, eh? Tell me more.
Ooh, okay. I could talk about user research all day. So here's how I would do this. I'd want to examine the steps and the pain points and the needs of applicants. I'd want to pull out the human experiences. I'd want to sit with them in their homes and their workplaces. I'd really want to get a feel for what it's like to be in their shoes when trying to get connected to these services. But I'd also want to go, like I said, behind the scenes. I'd want to see what service operations look like. I'd want to hear pain points from people who help folks enroll and who run these programs. Are there common problems they're coming in contact with? Is there best practice out there that we can be spreading and communicating?
So you'd sit with dozens of people as they're actually filling out these applications and follow the paper trail through enrollment. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, you're getting the hang of it.
So let's just say, hypothetically, we've done all this. What sort of things might you have learned?
Hypothetically, had we done that sort of exercise, we'd pull out stories from real people in the world. We want to get a sense for the qualitative state of what their life is like and what it means for them to move through these programs. But we'd also want to get really in the weeds. We want to map every single step of the experience from their perspective, find out what's working, where the bottlenecks get stuck, what helps them move through. This will then enable us to kind of pull back up and get a sense of, okay, what are the high-level needs that we can then take back to policy folks, like yourself, White House Ryan, to be able to sort of prioritize the work that we do.
That makes so much sense. Can you go back to that slide with all the lines? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. I also get excited about this one. So this is what we call a customer journey map. And what you're seeing here is places where people are really having difficulty moving through the process. That red and orange is where people are really getting stuck. We've learned a lot, and other people have researched this as well, that when people have to come in contact with these programs, when they have to send something in the mail, they have to receive a phone call, get notified about next steps, this is where the churn happens, where the processes are inefficient, and where things get really hard for people. This yellow line that you're seeing is the idea that if we can condense all of this into one step, if we can make it easier for people to enroll on the spot, we're going to save a huge amount of pain for the user and improve efficiency for government programs.
Sounds like you've done this before.
It's kind of my jam.
Man, it's so crazy that we met in this random bar, which unfortunately has no chairs, drinks, or bar. And don't you feel like everyone else in the bar is staring at us?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It's probably because of my White House badge. Anyway, you have no idea how helpful it's been to hear the approach that you take to this work. It's making me think that if we could combine your design skills and my policy skills, there's no question we could get so much done.
Yeah, that would be really awesome, but you don't think the federal government would let a designer like me help, do you?
Yeah, don't know about that.
End scene.
So for those of you who weren't tracking, this is in fact a true story with some embellishments for dramatic effect. The need for streamlining and making more efficient processes to enroll people in federal government programs has been a priority for the Obama administration from the beginning. Unfortunately, a lot of the operational and design difficulties that I was talking about have been frustrating policymakers long before he came into office. So over the past year, the White House has been working with a cross-agency team of federal partners, spearheaded by Jess Kahn from CMS, to put the tools of design, policy, and tech to work to improve how people get access to critical services. By bringing together these smart people from within government, some of the best people from outside of government to design this, and putting ourselves in the shoes of people who are actually using these programs, we've been able to develop some initial solutions to start making progress. But we still have a long way to go. Speaking of progress,
so that hypothetical case that I was talking about earlier, after we did all that research, we sort of took that back to states to try to understand what's keeping them from being able to make headway on some of those big pain points. Now, a lot of it has to do with policy that Ryan and her team are now trying to help us unblock. But we also heard about a few things that we thought, hey, the US Digital Service might be just the crew to help. It turns out that making multi-benefit applications that people can actually read, understand, and complete is really, really, really hard. And every state is kind of trying to do this on their own, in their own silo, with that limited funding. So we thought, all right, this is a thing that we can do. So over the past about a month and a half, we have been working hand in hand with folks on the ground to release what I'm excited to share today is the alpha of a multi-benefit mobile-friendly SNAP and Medicaid application. The idea is that it's sort of a template. It's something a state could take and customize to their own policy requirements and their own context. But we've done the hard work of trying to understand all the myriad of questions people are being asked, to understand directly from users on the front lines what's working, what language do they get, and take sort of the best practice of folks like the CalFresh team at Code for America who've learned a lot about this work over the years. Shout out to my crew back in DC who's been working really hard. It's incredibly exciting that we're able to sort of share this work with you today. But of course, it's just the beginning. It's an alpha. We're sharing this so that we can get feedback. Tell us what's not working. Bang around on it a little bit. If you run a program like this, let us know how you might use this. How would this be hard for you? How might this help you?
So one thing I hope that you take away from this example is that the solutions we're deploying weren't in the head of some policymaker in a Washington, D.C. office with no windows, but instead they were things that were already being deployed effectively at the local level. I really do see one of the core parts and most fun parts of my job as not being the one with the answers, but instead being the one who can go and pull in other smart people to help us solve problems. And two, look at what people are already doing all around the country, where they're doing things better in new ways than their peers, and they're doing it with the same restrictions and resources that everyone else has, but they found a way to make things better, often in the face of government requirements. So that's why I couldn't be more excited to be here, because so many of you in this room are those positive deviants. So I encourage you to share the work that you're doing with people from the federal government, because if you find the right person to talk to, the chances are we'll either learn from it, we'll start doing it ourselves, or better yet, we'll help other people steal your solution.
One final note to my fellow deviants, the designers and the technologists who are new to government. A major lesson in this project for us, which I think applies to everyone here, is that we have to approach our work with humility. You know, when we started working on this, we were the new kids on the block. People have been trying to crack this nut since, not just before I started working at USDS, but probably since before I was born. You know, there are folks, not just like Ryan, who work at the 10,000-foot view, but the government bureaucrats who implement these programs day in and day out, the people who work in these communities, who've lived these experiences. It's not incumbent upon us to just show up and become the saviors. We have to listen. We have to understand the struggle that they've been through, why the things that we're suggesting haven't worked before. And together, the combination of sort of our skills and passion and their lessons and experience give us sort of the ammunition to quickly and rapidly start making incremental change all together. Thank you.